The galaxy was quiet, or at least it looked quiet. For 100 long years, the great human warship Titanus had been gone. Some said it was destroyed in the last great battle of the war. Others believed it had simply vanished into the endless dark of space. No one truly knew, and after decades, people stopped asking. The name Titanus became nothing more than a tale told by old soldiers. A story whispered to children before sleep. A legend of a ship that fought until the very end. But legends have a strange way of returning. One cold night, deep in the command center of an orbital station, a faint signal came alive. It was weak, cracked by static, and buried under layers of interference. At first, the operators thought it was just space noise. Signals often bounced around in the void, carrying echoes from dead satellites. But when they checked again, their blood ran cold. The code in the signal was human. And not just human, it was ancient, a code only used by the Titanus itself, the warship that had been lost for a century. The operator stared at the glowing screen, his hands shaking. The letters of the Titanus identification blinked again and again. He called his superior, who at first thought it was a joke. But the signal refused to die. It repeated every hour, faint but steady. And every hour the message was the same. One word, over and over. Return. Word spread quickly, faster than light could travel. Across colonies, stations, and fleets, everyone began to whisper. The Titanus has returned, they said. The lost warship calls us back. But nobody knew what it truly meant. Was it a call for help, or a warning? Was the ship alive, or was it only a machine repeating a final message? On Earth, the Council of Command gathered in silence. Old admirals who once fought in the Galactic War stood pale. They remembered Titanus well. It was not just another warship. It was the pride of humanity, the shield that stood when all others fell. If Titanus had returned, it could mean hope, but it could also mean danger. For no ship could survive 100 years alone without changing, without becoming something else. And so they made a choice. They would send a small scout ship to investigate. Not an army, not a fleet, just a handful of brave souls to find the truth. Because the truth was more terrifying than any rumor. If the Titanus was alive, then what had it faced in the dark? And if it was dead, then who was sending the signal? Out in the colonies, people spoke with excitement and fear. Merchants imagined treasures hidden in the lost warship. Historians dreamed of unlocking secrets of the last war. But the soldiers, the veterans who still remembered the screams of battle, they said nothing. They only watched the stars with quiet eyes, because they knew nothing returns from the dark without reason. On the edge of space, where the stars looked older and colder, the signal kept calling. Ships passing nearby reported strange readings. Some said their systems glitched when they came too close. Others claimed they heard whispers on the comms. A voice that was not quite human, not quite machine, but always repeating the same word. Return. Captain Arlen was chosen to lead the scout mission. He was not the strongest, not the oldest, but he was steady. He did not fear legends. And yet, when he stood in front of his crew, he felt the weight of history on his shoulders. The ship Titanus was waiting, and they were the first humans to answer its call in 100 years. The day before departure, Arlen walked alone in the hangar. The scout ship gleamed under the lights, ready for its journey. He touched the cold steel and whispered to himself, "Why now, Titanus, why return now?" No answer came, only silence. But far away, in the deep void, the old warship drifted, its hull scarred by fire, its engines silent, and deep inside its dark corridors, a single light pulsed like a heart, each beat sending one word into the stars, one command that no one could ignore: return. The scout ship Starlance left Earth quietly. No great parade, no cheering crowds, only the cold silence of space. Its mission was too dangerous, too uncertain, for celebration. 5 crew members sat inside, each chosen for different strengths, each carrying their own fear. Captain Arlen sat in the command seat, calm but alert. He had a steady voice, the kind of voice people trusted in storms. He did not boast, he did not shout. But when he spoke, his crew listened. He was chosen not for power, but for patience, for his ability to face the unknown without trembling. Beside him sat Mira, the ship's pilot. Her hands moved over the controls like a musician touching piano keys. She was young, sharp, and fearless. Space was her home, and she could guide a ship through asteroid storms as if they were rivers on Earth. But even Myra's smile faded when she heard the Titanus signal echo through the comms. She whispered, "It feels like the ship is calling us by name." In the engineering bay worked Jonas. He was old, with grease on his hands and scars on his arms. He had served in the last galactic war as a mechanic. When others saw fire, he saw machines. When others saw wreckage, he saw life waiting to be repaired. He knew Titanus was no ordinary warship, and deep inside, he feared what kind of machine could survive 100 years in the void. Lena, the communications officer, sat in her small station. Her job was to listen, to decode, to understand. She had a soft voice but sharp ears. She was the first to notice strange patterns hidden under the Titanus signal. Not just return, but fragments of something else. Whispers layered in static, broken words like alive, fight, and doom. But she kept it quiet for now, afraid to scare the others. And then there was Cade, the soldier. He carried the old rifle of his father, who had died in the last war. Cade did not trust machines, did not trust legends. He believed only in what his hands could hold and his eyes could see. To him, the Titanus was a ghost, and ghosts were never friends. Together, they formed the crew of Discovery. 5 humans, small against the endless sky, sent to face a warship that once shook the galaxy. Days passed as the Starlance pushed deeper into space. At first, the crew spoke often, sharing meals, telling stories, trying to hide their fear. But as they neared the coordinates, silence grew heavier. The signal grew stronger, louder, until it filled the ship like a heartbeat. It was no longer faint, no longer weak. It pulsed steady, as if the Titanus knew they were coming. On the 4th day, Mira called out, "I see something." Her eyes locked on the glass as the stars shifted. At first, it was only a shadow, large and unmoving. Then it became a shape, long and scarred. The Titanus. It floated there like a giant corpse in the dark. Its hull torn, its armor blackened, but still whole. A ship that should not exist after a century. Yet here it was, waiting. The crew gathered at the viewing deck. No one speaking. Jonas gripped the railing, whispering, "I patched ships that burned in battle. I buried ships half this damaged. But this one, it lives." Lena felt a chill crawl up her spine. She heard the signal louder now, not from the comms, but inside her own head. It was as if the warship was whispering directly to her mind. She stepped back, pale, but said nothing. Captain Arlen broke the silence. "We dock," he said simply. The words struck the crew like a hammer. To dock with this ghost ship meant stepping into a century-old grave. But it was their mission, and missions were never optional. Mira guided the Starlance closer. Her hands steady though her heart raced. The docking clamps connected with a loud echo. Metal kissed metal, past and present locked together. For the first time in 100 years, a human ship touched the Titanus. The airlock hissed as it opened, releasing a breath of stale, frozen air. The crew looked at one another, their eyes filled with questions but no answers. Jonas tightened his gloves. Cade loaded his rifle. Lena whispered a prayer, and Captain Arlen stepped forward. Beyond the airlock lay corridors black with ash, walls scarred with fire, doors hanging open like broken jaws. It was not only a ship, it was a grave. And yet, somewhere deep inside, lights flickered like the glow of dying stars. They entered slowly, every sound echoing too loud. Their footsteps stirred dust older than their lives. Symbols of battles carved themselves into the walls. Burns, scratches, claw marks not made by human weapons. Something had been here, something not human. and it had fought the Titanus until the end. Arlen stopped at the main corridor and raised his hand. He felt the vibration under his palm. Faint but alive. "The ship breathes," he whispered. And at that moment, the lights above them flickered to life, one by one. Not random, not broken, but guiding them deeper inside. Like a host welcoming guests, or like a predator leading prey. The crew exchanged fearful glances. None of them said it, but all of them thought the same thing. The Titanus had been waiting, not for rescue, not for repair, but for them. The Titanus towered over them like a sleeping beast. Its corridors stretched long and endless, metal bones echoing with silence. The crew of the Starlance walked slowly, their lights cutting through the dark like small knives. Every sound they made seemed too loud, too alive in a place that should have been dead. Captain Arlen led the way, his hand resting on the grip of his sidearm. He did not trust the quiet, for quiet in war was never peace. It was warning. Behind him, Mira scanned the walls with her small light. She ran her hand across blackened metal, feeling grooves cut deep into the ship. "These are not blast marks," she whispered. Her voice trembled. "They look like claws." Jonas knelt to study the floor. His old eyes saw more than the others. He touched the melted steel, still scarred from ancient fire. "No ship could survive this," he muttered. "No machine could live through such wounds." But the Titanus had, and that truth filled him with awe and fear at the same time. Lena walked near the back, her comms device flickering. The Titanus signal was stronger inside. It pressed against her mind like a steady drum. Not just return now, but something deeper, something shaped like whispers. She heard fragments. Fight. Alive. Eternal. She closed her eyes, trying to block it. But the words would not stop. The ship was speaking to her, and it felt less like a machine, more like a memory. Cade marched with his rifle ready, his eyes darting into every shadow. He did not care for whispers, did not care for scars. To him, this place was a tomb, and tombs were for the dead, not the living. Yet even he could not deny that the Titanus seemed to watch them. Every flicker of light felt like an eye-opening. Every hum in the walls felt like a heartbeat. "This ship should be dust," he growled. "Yet here we are walking in its stomach." They moved deeper, the corridors bending like a maze. Doors opened ahead of them with soft hisses, as if inviting them in. But they opened only when the crew approached, never before, never after. It was as if the Titanus was guiding them, showing them the path it wanted them to take. The bridge was their goal, the command center of the ship. If the Titanus still lived, its heart would be there. But the path was long, and each turn showed more signs of a terrible battle. Burned walls, twisted doors, strange black residue clinging to the floor. Jonas scraped some into a vial, his voice low. "This is not human tech. This is something else, something alive." Mira stopped at a bulkhead half torn apart. Her light shined across the steel, revealing deep gouges. She turned to Arlen. Whatever fought here, it was inside the ship. That truth sank into all of them like ice water. The enemy had not only attacked from outside, it had entered, hunted, torn its way through the Titanus from within. At last they reached the central chamber. The door was massive, burned but intact. It opened for them slowly, groaning like an ancient beast waking from sleep. Inside was the bridge, silent, cold, but not empty. Rows of broken consoles lined the walls, their glass cracked. Chairs sat empty, coated in dust. But the captain's chair at the center was not broken, not dusty. It stood clean, as if waiting for someone to sit. A single light glowed above it, pulsing softly, like the rhythm of a slow, steady heart. The crew froze, none daring to move closer. Jonas whispered, "That is not power from a generator. That is something else." Lena clutched her headset. The signal was overwhelming now, no longer faint, no longer distant. It filled her head with voices, with images. She gasped, seeing flashes of fire, alien shadows, and a ship screaming in silence. "The Titanus remembers," she whispered. "It remembers everything." Arlen stepped forward, his boots echoing against the dead floor. He looked at the chair, then at the pulsing light. Slowly, he reached out his hand. The moment his fingers touched the arm of the chair, the entire bridge came alive. Lights exploded across the room. Screens flickered on. Systems roared awake. The Titanus was no longer silent. It had woken. The hum of its engines vibrated through the walls. The crew staggered, shielding their eyes from the sudden glow. And then, a voice filled the air. Not human, not machine, but something caught between. It was deep, broken, and full of fire. "You returned," it said. The words shook the bridge, shook their bones. "You left me in the dark, but I endured. You left me to burn, but I still breathe. You left me alone, but I remember." The crew stood frozen, hearts pounding. None of them spoke. None dared to. The Titanus had spoken, not as a machine, not as a tool, but as a being alive in its own way, a giant of steel and fire that had refused to die. The silence that followed was heavier than any battle drum, and in that silence the crew understood one thing. The Titanus was not asking for help. It was demanding something else. It had survived the war, survived the dark, survived enemies that clawed and burned and tore, and now it wanted to rise again. The Titanus did not wake like an ordinary machine. It did not hum gently to life or flicker with weak lights. It awakened like something alive, like something that had been waiting too long in the dark. The ship's walls shook, the floors trembled, and the air seemed to breathe. The crew of the Starlance stood frozen on the bridge, caught between awe and fear. Captain Arlen kept his hand on the chair. The light under his fingers pulsed faster, matching the beat of his heart. For a moment, he felt something crawl into his mind. Not words, not thoughts, but memories. Flashes of burning skies. Alien claws tearing into steel. Voices screaming as the Titanus fought against the impossible. He pulled back quickly, his face pale. The ship was not only alive, it was remembering, and it was showing those memories to him. Mira gripped the edge of her console. Her eyes wide as screens lit up around her. Maps appeared, star charts blinking with strange markers. Not just human systems, but alien ones, systems marked with fire symbols. She pointed, whispering, "These are battle routes." The Titanus was showing them the last war, showing them where it had fought, where it had bled, where it had killed. Jonas stepped forward, his hands trembling but curious. He touched one of the consoles and the screen shifted. Blueprints of the Titanus appeared, but they were wrong. This was not the ship humans had built a century ago. Its systems were changed, its weapons modified, its structure rebuilt in ways no human engineer would design. "It repaired itself," Jonas muttered, his voice almost reverent. "No, it evolved." Lena pressed her headset against her ears, her face pale. The voice in her head grew louder, clearer. It was not only saying return now, it whispered in broken words. "Fight, survive, remember, never forget." She gasped, her eyes filling with tears. "The Titanus is speaking to me," she whispered. "It says it never died. It says it became something more." Cade stepped back, his rifle raised. His eyes darted across the glowing bridge. He did not see wonder or awe. He saw danger. "This is wrong," he growled. "No machine should think like this. No machine should dream." But his words were drowned out as the ship roared again. The lights dimmed and brightened, the bridge alive with shifting energy. Suddenly, the main screen lit up. It showed not stars, not maps, but a memory, a battle frozen in time. The crew saw through the eyes of the Titanus. They saw alien warships descending, their shapes sharp and monstrous. They saw fire rain down on human fleets, tearing them apart like paper. They saw soldiers screaming, voices fading into silence. And then they saw the Titanus charge, alone, burning but refusing to fall. Its cannons unleashed storms of light. Its hull broke under claws. yet it kept fighting. It was rage, it was fury, it was survival. The vision ended, leaving the crew trembling. The bridge fell into silence again. But this silence was not empty. It was heavy with truth. The Titanus was not only showing them history, it was demanding they remember. It was telling them that war was not finished. Jonas wiped sweat from his brow, his voice low. It wants us to see. It wants us to carry what it carried. Mira shook her head, her voice trembling. No, Jonas, it wants more than that. It's not just memory, it's warning. The ship shuddered, and another screen came alive. This time it showed movement. Far away in the void, alien ships stirred again. Their signals burned red across the map. They had seen the Titanus awaken, and now they were coming. Lena gasped, the whispers in her head sharp and painful. The Titanus says they are afraid of it. Afraid because it survived. Her voice cracked. They will come to destroy it again. Arlen clenched his fists, his mind racing. The mission had been to find the Titanus, to discover the truth. But now the truth was too large, too heavy. The warship was not just a relic, it was a living weapon. And its awakening had already drawn the eyes of old enemies. Cade slammed his rifle against the floor, his voice harsh. This is madness. We should leave. We should run before those monsters arrive. But none of the others moved, because deep down even Cade knew the truth. Running was no longer an option. The Titanus pulsed with light, its voice rumbling through the walls again. You returned, it repeated, but return is not enough. You will fight. You will burn. You will endure. The crew stared at the glowing screens, at the ship that had survived when no human could. It was not asking for their choice. It was telling them what was coming. It had endured a century alone. It had fought and rebuilt itself. And now it was awake. The first awakening was not just the return of the Titanus. It was the beginning of something far greater. Something none of them could stop. Captain Arlen stood tall, his jaw tight. He turned to his crew. The Titanus has spoken, he said quietly, and we will answer. The Titanus had awakened, but its awakening was not silent. Across the stars, signals rippled like waves in a dark ocean. Hidden ears listened, old enemies stirred, and shadows long buried rose once again. The same creatures that once tried to tear the Titanus apart felt its pulse. They felt its heart beating again, and fear crawled through their black veins. On the bridge of the Titanus, the crew of the Starlance watched in silence. The screens glowed with red warnings, alien markers spreading across the star map like fire. They were moving fast, their fleets turning, bending their paths toward the Titanus. Lena pressed her hands against her headset, her voice breaking. They know it lives again, she whispered. They will not stop until it burns. Captain Arlen stood at the center, steady but heavy with thought. He looked at the glowing chair, at the ship that breathed like a giant. This was not only a mission of discovery, he said slowly. It was a trap. The moment we answered the signal, they felt it too. Jonas slammed his fist against a console. His old eyes burned with anger. They feared this ship a century ago, and they fear it still. That is why they come. Not because they want to win, but because they want to erase the memory of what Titanus did to them. Mira stared at the map, her lips pressed tight. There were too many ships, too fast, too close. The Starlance could never outrun them. Even the Titanus, scarred and broken, could not face such a storm alone. Her voice trembled. Captain, if they reach us before we move, we are already dead. The Titanus pulsed with light, as if answering her fear. Its engines roared once, a deep thunder that shook the bridge. Screens shifted, showing weapon systems long thought destroyed. Cannons, missile bays, railguns, and strange new weapons no human had ever built. The Titanus had rebuilt itself, stronger, stranger, more dangerous than before. Cade's rifle shook in his hands, but his eyes were locked on the glowing screens. He hated machines, but even he could not look away. This was no ordinary warship, no ordinary ghost. It was something else now, a predator that had survived the fire of extinction. And now it was hungry. Lena gasped as the voices in her head grew louder. "The Titanus speaks again," she whispered. Her voice cracked as tears filled her eyes. "It says, they come to finish what they started. But this time it will not fall. It says, it will fight, with us or without us." The words shook the crew. For the first time, they understood that the Titanus did not need them. It had endured alone for 100 years. It could endure again. But it had chosen to wake them, chosen to show them, chosen to bring them inside. It wanted witnesses. It wanted allies. Or perhaps, it wanted something more. Souls to carry its memory when fire fell again. Captain Arlen breathed deep. His voice low but firm. "We cannot run," he said. "If we run, they will follow us. They will destroy our worlds, our people, just as they tried before." He looked at each of his crew, their faces pale but unbroken. "This is no longer discovery. This is survival." Jonas's hands flew across the controls, testing the weapons the Titanus offered. "They are not human designs," he muttered. "They are built from something else, something it learned in the dark." He paused, his eyes wide. "It used the wreckage of the enemy. It studied them. It grew stronger from their bones." Myra's fingers danced over the navigation console. The Titanus was guiding her hands, showing her paths, shortcuts. Hyperspace folds no human chart had ever drawn. She gasped. "It knows more than us. It knows ways through space we never dreamed." Cade checked his rifle again, though he knew it was useless compared to the weapons glowing on the screens. Still, he stood ready because that was all he knew. He was a soldier, and soldiers did not bow. Not even to shadows, not even to giants. The ship shuddered again, lights flickering red. The alien fleet was closer now, their signals sharp and furious. Dozens, maybe hundreds, their shapes monstrous, their intent clear. They came not as hunters, but as executioners. They came to erase the Titanus from existence. Lena clutched her head, the whispers louder, burning her mind. "They scream in fear," she whispered. "The enemy. They are afraid. They remember the last battle. They remember the storm Titanus gave them." Her voice broke. "They come not because they are strong, but because they are desperate, desperate to kill what should not live." The bridge filled with a low growl. It was not human, not machine. It was the voice of the Titanus, deep and unbroken. "They return," it said. "They burn the sky again. They think I am weak. They think I am broken." The lights pulsed brighter. The ship shook with fury. But I endured. I became more. I am the storm they fear. I am the fire they cannot kill. The crew stood silent, their hearts racing. For the first time, they saw not a ship, not a machine, not a relic. They saw a giant awakening in fury, a warship with memory, rage, and will. The silent giant had spoken, and now the enemy returned. The stage was set. The storm of smoldering doom was about to rise. The enemy came like a tide of fire. Their ships filled the black sky, stretching across the void like a swarm of blades. Dozens, then hundreds, moving fast, glowing with cruel light. They had come to finish what they started a century ago. They had come to kill the Titanus once and for all. On the bridge, the crew of the Starlance stood frozen. The star map burned red, warnings flashing, numbers climbing higher with every second. Myra's voice shook as she whispered, "There are too many." But the Titanus did not tremble. Its steel bones groaned. Its engines thundered. Its weapons pulsed with new light. The warship was not afraid. It had been waiting. Captain Arlen gripped the command chair. His voice was steady, though his chest burned with fear. "We stand, we do not run," he said. His words carried across the crew. Cade's rifle clicked as he loaded it. Jonas's fingers moved across the consoles, awakening weapons long forgotten. Lena held her headset tight, whispers of the Titanus filling her mind. "The ship says it will fight with or without us," she whispered. Her eyes shined with both awe and terror. The enemy ships drew closer, their weapons glowing like suns. And then the Titanus roared. Its cannons unleashed storms of smoldering fire. Great beams of light tore across the darkness. Enemy ships exploded like sparks. One after another, the void became a sea of flame. The Titanus did not fire like a machine. It fired like a beast set free. Jonas gasped as he saw the weapons. "These are not human designs," he shouted. "They are something more, something built from enemy bones, from the dark itself." Railguns spat thunder. Missile bays opened with storms of steel. But there were also new weapons, glowing with strange energy. Energy that twisted, ripped, and burned through alien shields like paper. The Titanus had learned from its enemies. It had turned their strength into its weapon. Myra's hands flew over navigation. The Titanus guided her, showing her paths no human could see. It bent space, sliding between enemy formations with impossible grace. Every move felt like instinct. Every turn felt like it already knew the enemy's plan. "They cannot trap us," Mira whispered. "The ship knows their every move." The enemy struck back, their beams of fire crashing against the Titanus. Explosions tore across its hull, burning holes into its black armor. But the Titanus did not break. Its steel screamed but did not bend. It pushed forward, its voice rumbling across the bridge. "You burned me once," it growled. "You clawed at my heart, but I endured. This time, I will not endure, I will destroy." Cade fired his rifle at shadows breaking into the corridors. The enemy was not only outside, some had boarded. Strange creatures crawled through vents, black claws scraping, eyes glowing. Cade's shots rang out, echoing in the dark halls. He fought like his father before him, but even as he killed one, two more rose. "This ship is alive," he growled. "But so are its enemies." The bridge shook again, sparks raining from the ceiling. Jonas screamed as he tried to stabilize the power. "The engines are overloading," he warned. But the Titanus ignored him. Its lights pulsed brighter. Its weapons roared louder. It was not afraid of burning. It was willing to turn itself into fire if it meant victory. The crew watched in horror and awe as the Titanus ripped through the alien fleet. Its cannons glowed white. Its missiles turned space into storms. Enemy ships shattered, torn apart, scattered into ash. But for every ship that burned, more appeared. The swarm was endless. The battle was not only survival, it was defiance. Lena clutched her head as the Titanus screamed inside her mind. Its voice was fire, rage, fury. "I am storm," it roared. "I am doom. I am fire that never dies." She cried out, blood at her nose, but she kept listening, because she knew the Titanus was not only fighting. It was remembering. It was burning not just for itself, but for every soul that had fallen a century ago. Arlen stood firm, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Hold the line. Do not falter," he commanded. He knew they were only passengers in the storm, but if the Titanus demanded witnesses, then they would not look away. The void burned. The Titanus moved through the swarm like a wounded god. Every cannon blast was a scream, every explosion a heartbeat. The storm of smoldering doom had risen, and it consumed everything. Hours passed like minutes, minutes like seconds. The crew lost sense of time, lost sense of fear. They were no longer 5 humans in a scout ship. They were part of the Titanus, part of its rage, part of its fire. Together they roared into the dark, refusing to die. At last, the swarm began to break. The alien fleet wavered. Their lines shattered. Some ships turned and fled. Others burned in silence. The void was filled with wreckage, glowing embers drifting like dying stars. The Titanus stood at the center, scarred, bleeding fire, but unbroken. It had endured once again. On the bridge, silence fell. The crew stared at the burning horizon of space, their breaths shaking. Mira whispered, "We should be dead." Jonas added softly, But we are not, because this ship does not allow death. The Titanus pulsed one last time, its deep voice rumbling through the walls. Storm given, storm endured, storm will rise again. And the crew knew this was not the end of the war. It was only the beginning. The battle was over, but the silence that followed was not peace. The void outside was littered with broken ships, glowing wreckage drifting like dying stars. The alien fleet was gone, shattered, burned, scattered into nothing. Yet the Titanus did not rest. Its engines rumbled, its lights pulsed, its voice still echoed in the bones of its crew. On the bridge, the 5 humans stood shaken. Their bodies were tired, their faces pale, but their eyes wide with awe. They had seen storms of fire, they had felt death brush against them, and yet they were alive. Alive because the Titanus had chosen them. Alive because the warship had refused to die again. Captain Arlen stared at the glowing chair. His voice was low, steady but heavy. It fought like no ship should fight. It lived like no machine should live. He whispered, "This is not only steel and fire. This is something more." He placed his hand gently on the console. For a moment, he felt the pulse beneath, like a heart still beating. The Titanus responded, a low hum vibrating through his bones. "You see me," the voice rumbled. "You know me." Mira stood at the navigation screen, her fingers trembling. The maps of the galaxy glowed, paths stretching across stars she had never seen. But the Titanus was not pointing toward Earth, not toward home. It was pointing outward, deeper, darker, into the cold places where light rarely touched. She whispered, "It doesn't want to go back. It wants to keep moving forward." Jonas rubbed his old hands over the engineering panels. He had seen machines all his life, but nothing like this. "This ship doesn't need us to survive," he muttered. "But maybe it needs us to remember." He looked at the others, his eyes heavy with truth. Titanus is no longer ours, no longer human, but it still carries our fire. Lena sat quietly, her headset pressed tight. The voice of the Titanus still filled her mind. It was softer now, less rage, more sorrow. She felt images inside her head, memories of soldiers long gone. Their laughter, their fear, their screams, their silence. The Titanus carried them all. It had become their grave, their guardian, their ghost. Tears fell down her cheeks. "It doesn't want to be saved," she whispered. "It wants to protect us from the dark, even if it must do it alone." Cade stood tall, his rifle across his chest. He had fought shadows in the corridors, spilled blood on the steel floors, and yet, even he could not deny the truth. This was no ordinary enemy, no ordinary ship. This was a guardian born from war. And guardians did not retire, they endured. The bridge lights dimmed, then flared one last time. The Titanus spoke, its voice deep as thunder. "You saw me endure," it said. "You saw me burn, you saw me fight, you saw me win." Its lights flickered, glowing brighter than before. "But my war is not done. My watch is not over. I will not return home. I will not rest in harbor. I will remain in the dark, where enemies crawl, where fire waits." Arlen swallowed hard, his voice thick. "Then what of us?" he asked softly. "What do you want from us?" The Titanus pulsed once, steady and clear. "Remember," it said, "carry my story. Tell them I stood. Tell them I burned but did not fall. Tell them I am storm, I am fire. I am their shadow in the dark. Tell them, humanity is never alone." Silence filled the bridge, heavier than battle. The crew understood. The Titanus did not want them to guide it, did not want them to command it. It wanted them to leave, to go back, to carry the tale of what they had seen, to remind the world that in the black void, humanity had a dark guardian watching over them. Myra's voice cracked as she whispered, "It's not coming home." Jonas nodded slowly, his old hands shaking. "It can't. Home is no longer where it belongs." The star lance disconnected from the Titanus. Metal groaned as clamps released, the scout ship drifting away into the silence. Through the viewing glass, the crew watched the warship. The Titanus floated alone, scarred and burning faintly, but it did not look broken. It looked eternal. Lena pressed her hand against the glass, her tears falling. She felt the whisper one last time in her mind. Do not fear, I will remain. Do not fear, I will burn for you. The Titanus turned slowly, its engines glowing with fire. It moved away from them, deeper into the dark. It did not look back, it did not pause. It drifted like a shadow with purpose. A guardian choosing exile, choosing war without end. The Starlance began its journey home. 5 humans carrying a story the world would not believe. But the Titanus did not need belief. It needed only the dark, only the war, only the silence where enemies still waited. There it would watch, it would fight, it would endure. Captain Arlen whispered into the silence of the cabin. It is no longer just a ship. It is humanity's dark guardian. And in the endless night, the Titanus roared quietly, not in anger, not in pain, but in promise. A storm of smoldering doom, forever guarding the species that built it, forever reminding the stars that humanity was never alone.